joining us today. Soon, great to have you. I know it's a little early for you, earlier there.
It's okay, this will wake me up, right?
That's right. That's right. So, welcome to the 7th Disruptor Connection, where we connect with disruptive leaders from around the world. So, welcome to everyone. And those of you that are even watching on Facebook Live, we welcome you today. Just a couple things that are really critical as we jump in and as people are still joining us is, if you have not done so already this morning, go download the one-pager reminder. You can actually find the link in the chat right now. It just popped up again. Those are some notes that Soon's going to use that we're going to talk through today. Make sure to download those because we're actually going to do an exercise as a group today with that. So do not want to miss that. As well, if you missed our last Disruptor Connection, we released that week our Catalyst paper on our take for diversity and inclusion and how we are looking to blow it up. Would love for you to download that too as well. We are also recording this, so if you missed something that Soon said or that we talked about, don't worry, it'll be up on the Disruptor Connection tomorrow with the video, and you can also download the one-pager there as well. A couple other quick reminders. Use the Q&A. I have the Q&A up and running, so as we're talking, if you have questions for myself or Soon as we're going through this, put them in the Q&A. I will make sure that we get through those as much as we can today. And we are also monitoring the chat. So this is a really exciting day for us. We, I guess Soon, I met you almost 3 months ago through a mutual connection of ours who said, Shawn, you have to meet Soon Yu and you have to get him on your podcast. So this is kind of the pre of all that, or in the post of all that you and I met, connected immediately, and Soon recognized you as an immense disruptor in so many ways. But I want to read, and I'm actually reading off of a piece of paper here, just a little bit about Soon, so you guys that are just joining and have not heard of Soon can understand not only the power that he has and the mindsets, but what a disruptor he is. Soon Yu is an international speaker, award-winning author on innovation and design, and Forbes contributor who has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Entrepreneur Magazine, and New York Times. His book, Iconic Advantage, challenges businesses from Fortune 500 to venture-backed startups to refocus their innovation priorities on building greater iconicity, and we're going to talk all about that today, and offers deeper insights on establishing timeless distinction and relevance. He regularly consults business leaders on developing meaningful, iconic signature elements, iconic brand language, and see, of course, right here in the middle of trying to read it, it totally disappeared on me. On brand language, signature moments, which I love. We'll talk hopefully some about that today, and signature communication. He most recently served as the Global VP of Innovation and Officer of VF Corporation, parent organization to over 30 global apparel companies, including the North Face, Vans, Timberland, Nautica, and Wrangler. While at VF, Soon created $2 billion innovation pipeline, established 3 global innovation centers, and initiated industry design best practices. There is so much more to say about him, but want to actually get into that today. So again, if you have not downloaded the one-pager, please make sure you do that because we are going to jump in that. And Soon, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, John. I'm very excited to be here. I'm humbled that you asked me to be part of this, and I'm hoping that I can be helpful for the folks that are on the call with us here. And no, I was thinking back on how we met, and we were connected, and then immediately you invited me to some really fun event where I got to drink a lot of whiskey. So I just want to say Thank you. By the way, I go grab my bottle, but it is completely empty as of yesterday. So,
Well, we'll have to get some more with Allison for you. So yes, for the Bryn whiskey, yes, and I have a bottle here with us as we're on vacation this week, and I think ours is almost empty as well too,
right.
From this week. But so tell the listeners and all today that are with us, what pulls you to this type of work? What motivates you? I mean, I know when I learned about really the parent corporation VF, I had no idea all the businesses they owned and the influence you had there. But tell us, what pulls you to this type of work?
Sure. I think I would just probably describe myself first as a nerd, and specifically a brand nerd. I just love this idea of brands, building brands, and the mystery there is about both brand relevance and brand significance. And so I think that's what's always drawn me to this side of the world in terms of innovation, design, and storytelling. All those elements really help sort of build the brand. And yeah, so I think just inherently I'm a brand nerd. The other thing I think that really motivates me is, I've always been somebody that likes to tackle sticky issues or personal pet peeves of mine, things I find that aren't quite working. I always like to come up and tinker and try to find solutions for those things. And so those two things, sort of having that curiosity of being a nerd, and then the desire to fix things and tinker to do that, have been sort of my MO. And what kind of sort of led me to write this book was, in doing my MO of having the curiosity of, what makes a brand work, and then trying to fix things and make things successful, is that I've had actually a lot of failure. I actually, in working at VF, working in a lot of my previous organizations and startups, I've had a lot more failure than success. And when I was doing research on sort of what is great design, what is great innovation, I came across a set of companies, about 50 of them, that were just doing innovation and design so differently than what I had been doing. And they had been really focused on the idea of building timeless brands that really stood the test of time, that had what I call a distinction that was not only relevant today, but is relevant yesterday, and it would be relevant, tomorrow. And I was just curious, how were they able to do that? Because when they were able to do that over time, they became standard bearers for that distinction. And eventually, being standard bearers, they became iconic for that distinctive relevance. And so that led me to kind of look, pattern seek, right, and figure out, well, how are these businesses doing that? And I realized, wow, they're doing it intentionally. And there were a set of best practices and principles that they followed that helped them build timeless brands. And so that's what I wrote the book about. I reverse engineered it, and I kind of just said, hey, here's the formula. Here's what Nike, here's what Burberry, here's what BMW, here's what Amazon. This is what they're intentionally doing to build timeless brands.
Wow, love that stuff. So just off the top of your head, and we didn't even necessarily talk about this, I don't think we have it in our questions. Tell us, what are your top 5 timeless brands? Like, if you're going to look at them and to study, what would be the top 5 you would say, go study these brands?
I think the ones I mentioned obviously are great. Like Nike has done an incredible job. The Air Max, right? It's an incredible shoe. It's over 30 years old. They have a signature element that everyone's very familiar with, which is the air pocket, right? In the sole of the shoe. And it's great because it's a great point of difference that really signifies what their benefit is, which is, this idea of giving you a bounce, giving you buoyancy. Most trainers lose 40% of their their sort of buoyancy in the life of the shoe, but a pocket of air will never lose its bounce. So it's really powerful. And what they've done is they've kept that very familiar. They've always had that sort of air pocket design, but they've really developed new stories in terms of, where the shoes go. They went from this to golf, to soccer, to tennis, all these different places, from basketball, and from running. And then they've also added new innovation. in terms of, changing it from just the back to the front to the whole shoe and all these different designs around that. And then obviously they've kept the designs highly relevant. They're so collectible, right? They are so apropos and so timeless in terms of continually updating design while marrying what's familiar. That's sort of the trick. Adding new innovation, storytelling, design to something that's signature, that's familiar. It's marrying the new with the familiar. So Nike is a great company that I have a lot of respect for. Not part of the VF portfolio, was actually a competitor, but great respect for them. Another brand that I'm personally in love with is Porsche. I think they have taken their iconic shape, the fact that they had this incredible engineering flaw, which is having the engine in the back, where basically you're going to create spin outs and it's very hard to maneuver. And they've still been able to keep that iconic shape and have the engine in the back and somehow have beat the sort of odds in terms of creating something that is an incredible driving machine. So those are two. I could go on more and more, but definitely those are two of one of my favorite brands.
I love what you just said, though, because I've never heard it put that way soon about, an iconic brand in Porsche with the ultimate flaw. And I guess I've never thought about, with the engine, like so many dangerous things that could happen, right?
Shawn, to your point, sometimes your so-called warts become your iconic signatures if you know what you're doing. And a good example is the Naked Juice brand. And one of their big flaws early on is that, they actually had a lot of separation because it was fresh, all right? And so oftentimes you buy your Naked bottle of juice and you'll see that on the top, it's all sort of light and clear, and on the bottom, it's very, cloudy, right? And they basically leverage that as their, key point of difference, which is, hey, if it's natural, shake it. If it's natural, it's gonna be cloudy, right? They basically own that idea, right? And then they went even further, and you look at their ingredient list, and basically all they do is they have visuals of 2 bananas, 1 apple, and 3 strawberries, and that's all that's in the bottle. And so they kind of own this idea that it's supernatural. And one of their key warts is that it's separated. And they basically said, look, if it doesn't separate, it's processed. Right?
That's right.
Right.
Well, that's a great point. Hey, we've got a couple questions already soon, and then we're going to drive into, the part of this series. We've really dug in the past 5 or 6 episodes around designing for a just world, and, what's happening in our world today. But what are the biggest mistakes that people and companies often make when they're trying to get their brand or their story out in the world?
Well, I think the first mistake I think people have is they are reactionary, right? They don't have any grounding as to what they believe in and who they are and what they promise to people, and what makes them different in delivering that promise. And I find that too often you look at the trajectory of brands and they're always changing a key message. The benefits are different. The look and feel is also totally different. And sometimes they're even changing who the audience they're going after, okay? But I think the fundamental problem or sort of flaw or key, mistake that I see brands make is that they don't know who they are and they're not grounded in who they are. And why? Because 2 reasons. Consumers see right through you when you're not authentic, right? When they know that all you're doing, you're being charitable now, but you've never been charitable for the last 50 years, or you're only charitable during key disasters and you leverage it for your advertising. But once the disaster's over, you never talk about how charitable you are again, right? And we never see you doing it again, right? And you're like, okay, that doesn't really jive very well. So this idea of being authentic. And I think consumers now have a higher degree of what I would consider lower degree of tolerance around brands that are truly not authentic. So I think that's a big reason why companies make big mistakes when they don't know who they are. So to me, that's probably the biggest mistake I see.
That's interesting to me, soon, because I think my sense of my radar and sense of looking at that right now is going to be really interesting. Once we go out through COVID, and all the stuff that's happened around racism, you see all these companies that are buying into this and promoting, but I really am interested to see if that's going to be the case 6 months, 12 months down, right? So I love that perspective. And I think that really helps us jump in here soon too. You know, what we really talked with you about is finding your path to purpose and how to do that. So how does having and knowing purpose make our world a better place, in your opinion?
Well, you know, people go to work, do stuff for different reasons. And when you think about the Maslow hierarchy, sometimes it's just, look, I got a job, I've got to pay the bills. Totally get it. All right. And it may not be your ideal job. And, you know, sometimes that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. But let's all think about a situation when we had a job that not only we got paid, but actually it's a job where they could have paid us less and it would have been okay because we were just so engaged with the team. We liked what we were doing. We liked the impact it was having with the people that engaged with the brands, our customers. And you know, maybe you wouldn't work for free, but boy, you know, they paid you 20% less, you probably wouldn't have left. It's a job that you fundamentally love. And so, you know, I'm thinking about the idea that the reason why it's really critical to have purpose. Purpose, I think people mistake purpose as, oh, let's have a purpose so that we're a purpose-driven company. And so everybody on the outside can say, wow, you guys are so socially responsible. Purpose is meant to be really intrinsic and internal. All right, so this is really critical. If you have a purpose, it should speak first and foremost, not to your customers and not to the consumers, but to your employees. Purpose is what is the reason your employees and you get up in the morning and go to work, okay? The purpose isn't just to make a salary. The purpose is to do something that you find gives you the motivation, that extra sort of lift in your step, you know? And I think was it Dan Pink's most recent book, he talks about, you know, the key motivations that make people do anything. And one of them is a higher sense of purpose. So as a company leader, it's critical that if you're designing your purpose, it has to resonate with you. Okay. If it doesn't resonate with you, you're never going to be able to sell it. And like call it your employees are the consumers of your leadership. Okay. They're going to see right through it. Right. And you're not authentic. So it has to make you want to come up and get up in the morning and go to work. But it also has to make them want to do that, okay? And so purpose is really critical. Why are you guys doing this business beyond making a profit, okay? Is there something that you're doing? And so I think back and, you know, I can share some examples of good purposes of other brands, but like one of the brands I work with is the North Face, and their purpose was to inspire people to live a life of exploration. That's why those folks worked at the company. And when you went to visit the North Face, you saw a lot of folks that really believed that and actually lived that lifestyle. They believe in a life of exploration. Another great brand, part of the VF portfolio, their purpose, and I'll read it to you, is to inspire youth culture through creative expressions and off-the-wall attitudes. That's Vans, and it's a very different purpose than the North Face. And yet, you know, you go and you look at the hallways of North Face, you see, you know, people that you could tell were out mountain climbing the previous weekend, and you go to Vans and everyone has tattoos and, you know, they've got hair like you and they just, you know, they've got your vibe basically, right? And so, you know, but yet that's why they came to work, is they wanted to live that lifestyle. So anyway, that's why I think purpose is critical for companies to really resonate with their employees. And if they don't, you know what, customers will be able to see if your employees aren't all that excited about working there. And a good example of somebody who's doing it wrong is Facebook. Totally wrong.
Yeah, right. Wow. So, hey, listen, we are getting a ton of questions here. So let me dive into this, and then I want to dive in even more around purpose and using your brand pyramid. But what steps, this is for Jasmine, what steps would you suggest to taking to take aligning your purpose and building your own business out of your purpose?
Sure. I mean, obviously, first thing you want to write down is, to me, the first step is actually writing down your values. What are the things and principles that you hold true to yourself? And they're the guiding principles that, when no one else is in the room, help sort of guide you through ethical dilemmas, right? These are the things that you're actually willing to lose business, revenue, and profits for in order to hold true, okay? You need to understand what those are for you. Those are the things that you won't break, okay? And then your purpose has to be congruent with those values, but also has to speak to a deeper sense of why you want to do what you're doing, all right? And I think the first step is, it's self-examination. As the leader of the company, you need to both understand what is important to you as values, and then why do you get up in the morning? Why are you doing this? And my suggestion here is, when you're thinking about purpose, think about two broader contexts. One is time. Think about, hey, in 5 or 10 years, okay, if I'm doing my purpose, what might be different? In the second context, which is not just for me, not just for the company, but for the people that the company will touch, okay? And if you think in those terms, if you think in those broad terms, like, what is your impact 5 or 10 years to your broader audience that motivates you to do what you do, something you don't need to tell anybody, something you just need to understand yourself, you and your employees know, then that is, if you have that mindset, then you can better articulate why you're doing what you're doing.
I love it. And I think soon you're at that place in your life. I'm 47 years old and started Mofi, which is a consulting arm of our business. The Disruptor League we started this year because I was tired of not living in that purpose, right? And I felt like there was a bigger purpose for me and for this company. And you're right, like, that motivates me more than anything, even in the frustrations, is that at least I wake up every day getting to do my purpose and getting to influence people with moments like this. Like, not everybody gets to do this, with such amazing disruptors as you. So let's really talk about using your iconic brand pyramid. And for all of you that are listening, if you've got that one page, or pull that up, look at the front page, because I really want, this is important. What can we learn when we're talking about purpose from the iconic brand pyramid that you have created?
Sure. So let's just take a step back and talk about this idea of having your pyramid. To me, you have to know who you are for a couple reasons. And you think about it from the both your employees and also from your customers. If you're schizophrenic, basically brands, businesses, and even people. Okay, let's just leave it with brands. Okay, let's talk about this idea of building a brand. And this is the brand, what I call the brand pyramid, that sort of encapsulates your brand DNA. And why that's important is, people have relationship with brands similar to relationships they have with people. Okay, and think about the brands you were asking me about, Nike and Porsche, right? I actually have a love affair with those brands. I, over time, fell in love with those brands. And therefore, I have a relationship with those brands because I have that emotional connection to those brands. I'm in love with those brands. And when I talk to marketers, I say, look, people, just like when they fall in love with people, don't want to fall out of love with those people, okay? There's no reason I need to fall out of love with you, Shawn. If I think you're the bomb, right? You got the cool hair, you're doing all these cool, you have a vision of the world and you're going after it, and you no holds bar, and I love that about you, right? There's not a reason that I want to fall out of love with you, your business, and what you're doing. And the same holds true for a brand, right? So the marketer's responsibility is to make sure that consumers are all in, that they have no reason to ever be on the fence on the brands that they love. And in order to do that, you have to have a brand that, one, resonates, okay? And then two, is authentic and consistent. And like I said before, you asked me what the fatal mistake that a lot of businesses have, they don't know who they are. And so what this pyramid is, and those 4 elements in this pyramid, help ground you and remind you about who you are and why you're doing what you're doing and what you are promising those people who interact with you. Okay, so, and you can see the visual pyramid. I think the folks have it probably up, right? Okay, they're looking at it. There's sort of 4 different elements in this brand pyramid. It starts with purpose and values on the bottom, builds up from that in terms of what's your personality, how do you come across to folks, and then from there, what are you promising to deliver the people that interact with you? You know, they're going to have a relationship with you. What's your promise to them? And then in delivering that promise, how do you do it distinctly? How do you do it differently? What's your key point of difference in doing it versus somebody else who's saying the same promise, right? The very bottom one is an internal sort of dimension. It is something like we were talking about earlier, like, you know, this idea, if you're not grounded in terms of what you're about, what you believe in, those are your values, okay? And why you're doing what you're doing, then everything else that you build on top of it is just not as meaningful nor as strong, okay? And so that has to be internal motivation. That gets you and your employees up in the morning to go to the company. And so you have to start there. You have to be grounded in what you believe in and why you do what you do. And that's what the purpose and values are. And I think we listed some values that, you know, I've worked with almost 100 companies now in terms of developing their brand pyramids. And so here are ones of values that I've seen most common. And I believe are we doing the questionnaire now, or we do that later? What do you want to do, Shawn?
We can jump into the questionnaire if you want to, yeah.
So I think one of the things that we want to do today is actually walk people through the pyramid and kind of have them do parts of this themselves, just as sort of a practice. Obviously, you know, it's funny, I've worked with clients where within an hour we're able to develop a first pass of their brand DNA. And usually it doesn't take more than an hour to do that, and sometimes only half an hour. And then we obviously go back and we share it with other people, we iterate on it and refine it. But if you look at these set of values, what are the ones that, you know what, really hold true for you? Ones where it's the way you live your life. It's the way that you won't bend. Like, even if somebody paid you 2x to violate that, you wouldn't do it. It's just not part of your DNA. And what I would encourage people to do is look at the ones that are listed here as a starting point. You can obviously find other ones that aren't listed here, but just use this as a starting point. And are there 5 to 8 that resonate with you? And that's sort of the first pass. Pick 5 or 8 that really resonate with you. And then what I would ask you to do after that, after this call, is to sharpen your pencil and then maybe say, what are the 4? You know, can you get down to 4 that you're going to hold true? It's not that you're never not going to be honest, but that's not, you know, what you're built on. It's maybe that's not the whole thing, right? Some of these are maybe called par for the course. What are the ones where you're going to double down on that, you know, no matter what happens, you will never bend on? So that's what I encourage you to do as step 2. And I don't know if we're doing the survey, but why don't people go ahead and pick, what's the way you work the actual questionnaire? Is there a questionnaire, Shawn? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so here, this is what we can do just for everybody. If you flip over that one pager, or if you're looking at it, it's page 2. So this is part of what we are diving into, is the purpose of self. So those values that Soon just walked you through on the one slide, you know, put that's the purpose and values underneath on the bottom of it. And then I know our producer Matt's got a second slide, I believe, for us coming up soon that may have some of those. I believe you had some questions. Is that?
You know, I'm actually not. I think we have archetypes, which is the second part.
Archetypes, that's the second part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, while people are doing that, let's dive in. We have a ton of questions right now.
Sure.
For you. So from William, do you understand the major shift underway that fundamentally requires leaders in all orgs to earn greater significance as success follows.
Say that again. So do understand
We understand the major shift underway that fundamentally requires leaders and all orgs to earn greater significance as success follows.
And I think my question would be, and maybe you and I can interpret this, and I want to make sure I answer this right. Greater significance, and what would be the definition of greater significance? Because a lot of things could go through my mind. Shawn, how would you interpret the idea of greater significance?
Yeah, well, and I think that, you know, we have a big discussion within our organization, and some of the teams probably listening to this right now. You know, my significance as a company is not driven by dollars, right? So we don't get up in the morning and go, let's go do this because we need to go make this much money, or we need to go get this client. We get up very much and what your brand pyramid is, and we say, what's our purpose and our values? Let's lean into that. That's our greatest significance. And that is something as, you know, us as the Disruptor League, those of us in Mophie, we are not giving that up. Will not give that up. So that to me is greater significance, right?
Okay, now I understand that. And to me, it's this idea that, are you purpose and mission driven, right? And I'm finding that, you know, I'm working with a lot of companies, and, you know, it's unclear. Two things. Some of them have not really articulated. They articulated what their mission is, and a lot of it's around, you know, being the most successful, having the highest market share, blah, blah. You know, they've outlined what I call goals, okay? And they have certain aspirations, but they haven't laid out, to your point, what gets them up in the morning, you know? And so I think there was an early question about, you know, the sort of the 1, 2, 3s or the steps to build the purpose. One thing I failed to mention was in this idea of extending the time and broadening the view. A simple way to say it is, what's the vision of the world for you in 5 or 10 years if you are successful in this endeavor? Okay. Yeah. How will the world change from A to B, and how will B look like? Okay. And if you can articulate that, then you understand part of your biggest purpose is to deliver against that vision. Okay. All right. So if you have a vision 5 or 10 years out of how the world could be better, obviously it should be better if you're doing something. Okay. Then that is how your purpose is going to be defined. Right. And to this viewer's question, absolutely, there's a big shift and I think it's actually coming as much external as it is internal. I think employees are looking around saying, look, you know, I don't have to, I can work from anywhere now. I can work from so many different types of companies now. So I actually have, in some ways, more options available to me, assuming, you know, obviously the economy improves and we get through this COVID thing. But there will be many more options available to people. They can live anywhere in the world. They can live and work for a different type of company. And as an employee, you're going to be looking at companies and saying to yourself, again, is this a company I just want to make money in, or is it a company I would actually be willing to be paid a little bit less, but love what I'm doing because I believe in what I'm doing, right? And yep. I think 9 out of 10 people I know are going to probably look more towards companies in the latter camp. Okay.
Yeah.
So absolutely, there's a huge shift towards having purpose.
Yeah, I mean, my own personal story and journey in my career, you know, I worked for the Walt Disney Company for several years, knowing that I could make more money someplace else, but I believed so much in their purpose and what they were doing that I stayed there, right? And that's what that was for. We have this other question, and I love this. I would love your perspective on this soon. I'll give mine real fast when I ask it here, but what is the difference between purpose and mission? And my quick response to that is my gut said purpose is an internal personal thing. Mission is an external consumer customer thing. What's yours, Soon?
I think the kitchen response is what you just said. However, I'll say this, in working with companies, I find that, you know, it's like, how do you want to say this? It's not overly critical, I find, in working with people that they get the definition perfect. I think at the end of the day, if your mission and your purpose sound exactly the same, I'm okay with that. Okay, you know. But you know, I'll give you some examples to your point. You know, the purpose of North Face is to equip you to push your limits and feed your soul. That's an external statement. They're promising their users to equip them to push their limits and to feed their souls. That's what their promise is. And their purpose is inspire people to live a life of exploration, and they're doing it through that promise. Okay, so that mission, to your point, right? So there is this idea of internal, external. Oftentimes, though, when you read them, they sound fairly close. I think as long as, to your point, you can think of purpose as something that you and your employees, it resonates with you and your employees, and you say it in a way that's speaking to yourself, that's all that matters, okay? If that's the same statement that resonates with your customers, fine. But I think that's a simple sort of shorthand, is exactly what you said. Make sure that your purpose is written in a way that it speaks to you. And if for some reason that speaks to your customers and they're exactly the same, that's fine. But make sure when you're working on your promise and mission that it speaks to your customer. And it's just writing it in those so-called points of views.
Yeah, here's a interesting one. Love your take on, and then I want to make sure we go back to the exercise and the archetypes too. But since the Brazilian companies bought Chiquita, what happened to the iconic brand, and why didn't they capture on that brand here in the U.S.?
I'm sorry, why didn't they what?
Why didn't they capture, or I think lean into that brand that was here in the U.S.? Like, to me, Chiquita was an iconic brand, right?
Yeah, no, I think, unfortunately, you know, I know the history of Chiquita because I used to work there.
Oh.
And here's, you know, part of the evolution is when I got there, it was, had a historic past. It had the Chiquita logo, right? It had the Chiquita Banana song, Chiquita Banana, dun, dun, dun. Remember that song, right?
Yep.
And then it had Miss Chiquita, who was kind of doing the
Yep.
dancing, right? Okay, and those are all part of its iconic heritage. And we actually celebrated it. When I was there, we absolutely celebrated. We even took the familiar logo, and we had a contest where people could actually design new ones, right? And we put them on the bananas, and we had a contest where people were creating their own and sort of co-creating the logo with us, and it was a lot of fun. And we had really strong sales, and we actually created a reason for people to buy us versus Del Monte or some of the other brands, because a banana is a banana, right? So I think what happened is it's changed ownership twice. Okay. Actually, sorry. Yes, no. Okay. So what happened is they changed leadership first. And in the process of changing leadership, they moved to North Carolina from, they were in Cincinnati, moved to North Carolina. In that change, they went to more of a commodity mindset, okay? Where it was all about volume and sales and less about the brand. And then when they sold it again, I think the metrics that the company was sold on was purely on sales and volume and margins, and not about the brand. Because by the time the Brazilian company had purchased it, there was probably, I would say, a good 5 to 7 years of no investment against the brand. So I fully understand why the Brazilian company kind of looked at it as, hey, it's a great business for a certain amount of sales and maybe leveraging our supply chain, whatever it might be. So unfortunately, when the Brazilian company bought it, it'd been devoid of brand investment for almost 7 years.
Yeah, and it's funny to me, soon I moved to Cincinnati in 2014, and people still talk about, you know, when Chiquita left Cincinnati and that icon that it was there. Well, let's go back to the, you know, introducing you to you and using this, the personal brand DNA. We did the slides on, you know, purpose and values where you challenge people, but let's go to the archetypes. I want to make sure we get to that as you start looking at personality, promise, and, you know, even your own point of difference.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you think about, okay, so the first rung was really around the purpose and values, and that's grounding you in terms of who you are, okay? The next one is, you know, how do you come across to the world? And oftentimes how you come across is sort of what motivates you to interact with people. And a great way to think about how you might come across is using the mnemonic of archetypes. There are 12 well-known archetypes that have been used over the last few hundred years, from Plato to Hollywood, okay? You know, when you watch movies, you resonate with a lot of the characters because they are actually certain archetypes. You know, your regular guy and girl is Forrest Gump, you know, your outlaw is James Dean. So like when you read these, there's actually another slide which we won't share here, but I think Matthew can probably send it out to folks. It gives you a deep dive in each one of these archetypes. But what I would ask people to think about is, what are one or two archetypes that really resonate with you in terms of, you know, how you want to come across? You know, what motivates you to interact with people? You know, are you somebody who is very focused on, you know, providing health and wellness and goodwill to people? Well, then you're probably a caregiver. Are you somebody that's, you know, very thoughtful and analytical and extremely intelligent, and the way you come across and the way you communicate is all about your source of knowledge and your curiosity? Well, then maybe you're a sage. The North Face, can you guess which one of these the North Face is? It's right there. Oh, sorry. Okay, it's right there. Yeah, it's very much the explorer. And it's funny thing with VF, this was really important because we had 30 different brands. We needed each of the brands to have their own distinct personality, and having these archetypes both helped pull them apart, but also gave the main motivation for why they were who they were. So obviously Vans was the outlaw. So what I would ask folks to think about is, which of these resonate with you as you are building your business and your brand? Think about your consumers, think about what they want, think about who you are, what motivates you, and it should be the marriage of those two. But first and foremost, it can't be something you're not. Even if your consumers really value, let's say they value a caretaker, but that's just not in your DNA, you know, you're going to have to deliver your promise maybe with a different archetype, and that's perfectly fine. So these are really, I think, simple ways to think about the idea of personality, because a lot of times personality can be what I call very nebulous. You know, oh, well, I'm, you know, very friendly. Well, what does that mean? You know, and so this helps give you a little more structure to think about how you come across to other folks and why you do what you do, or why your personality is the way it is.
Yeah, so my challenge to everyone today that's on here is take time, either today over the weekend, go through this. Like when I looked at it for the first time, it really started to challenge me how to think. And
what's your archetype, Shawn?
My archetype, you know, that's probably been my struggle. I think I'm probably a sage in some way. You know, but I'm also the adventurer explorer. So
you know, you can be sort of have a primary and a secondary.
Yeah. I love it. I want to do one last question before we start to wrap up here. So how do you balance the need for intentional waste, like money and time, and being viable around for years and years, to find your way to iconic signature moments as a brand?
Wow, that's a lot packed in there. Okay. Let's talk about what makes something iconic, and then from there we'll talk about how signature moments fits in with the idea of timeless relevance. Okay, so we talked about it a little bit earlier. When I researched these 50 companies, I found that there were 3 qualities that the 50 companies all shared. Okay, whether this was about an iconic brand, iconic product line, or, you know, iconic company, and that was first and foremost that they had something that made them stand out, something distinctive, something that made them unique versus their competition, something that they would gain some repute from, right? Reputation from. Okay, and it was important that this distinction, the second quality, was whatever that distinction was, it was highly relevant to their audience. Now, the trick about this relevance is what I talked about earlier. It wasn't relevant just today. It was relevant yesterday, and it will be relevant 50 years from now. Okay, so that is really the trick, is how do you create that relevance for that timeless distinction. And then the third quality is that they were universally recognized for that distinctive relevance, okay, with the audience that they wanted to be iconic for. And your audience could be globally like Coke, but it could be in San Francisco. We have a place called Potrero Hill. It's a region, and there's a very famous pizza joint called Goat Hill. And what they're famous for is sourdough pizza, okay? And, you know, that's what makes them timelessly relevant, because no one else has sourdough pizza like they do, okay? And that's all they wanted to be iconic to, is basically Potrero Hill in San Francisco, and they did a fantastic job of that. So those are the three qualities: distinction, timeless relevance, and universal recognition. If you achieve those with longevity, you'll become the standard bearer for that distinctive relevance and achieve iconicity. So the key is, how do you create this timeless relevance? Okay, let's assume, based on their DNA, you go through it and you go up to the top, which is, what's your key point of difference? Okay, simple way to think about your key point of difference is if you can embody that with some type of a signature, something where people remember you with and for. And a good example of a signature would be when you think of a vacation beer, right? You think of the beer with the lime in the neck, okay? And the signature for the Corona beer is really the lime, okay? You know, most Corona beers are naked without the lime. And every time you see that lime in the neck of the beer, you think of Corona, but you also think of being on the beach, right? And so it is their key signature. We talked earlier about Nike and the bubble and the sole, right? So all of that, okay? So having that key signature, how do you keep it timelessly relevant? Well, the way you do it is you protect that signature element, you don't change it, but you add new innovation, new design, and new storytelling to that. So like when we talked earlier about the Nike air bubble, right? They kept improving the technologies. That was through innovation. They kept increasing the story of where in the globe it'd go, what type of different categories, whether it be soccer or golf, you know, that it would extend to. And the design was always changed and always relevant to the zeitgeist of the era that it was in. And so it was this combination of protecting your signature element, but infusing with new design, new innovation, and new storytelling, okay? And to your point, some people have signatures that aren't about product features. They're about signature moments. And I'll go to Apple. You know, all of us have probably purchased an Apple product. And if I was asked, poll your audience, how many of you have kept an Apple package and still have an Apple package from a product you bought a while back? Almost 90% of the people I asked raised their hand. I go, why? Why would you keep the package? Do you use it for anything? No. What does it do? It's in your closet. You never pull it out ever again, right? But you have a hard time throwing it away. It's because a signature moment that Apple owns is the unveiling of the treasure that they've created for you, the treasure box, right? It's multi-layer, it's an experience, it's beautiful. The box itself and how it's organized actually celebrates the product, but in and of itself, it's a beautiful experience and a beautiful item that you don't want to throw away. And that to me is a signature moment, the unveiling of your Apple package.
Wow. So we are definitely come to the end. There's a new brand out there that I have fallen in love with. If you know anything about me soon, and those on here that know about me, I love jewelry. But you talk about signature moments. There's a jeweler. And so I'm going to challenge you to go out soon and do some studying on Jason of Beverly Hills.
Okay.
But this is his signature, the red stripe, everywhere. Everywhere you get something from him, people know it by that. That is such a iconic moment that I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful. In each of these that you've shared, soon we could keep going forever. Again, so powerful on finding your purpose individually, finding your purpose as a company. Thank you so much. I am really, really excited to say, for those of you that enjoyed this, this year I launched my podcast, The Combustion Chronicles. Soon is actually closing out season 1 for us. And that is like 2 weeks from today. As a matter of fact, I asked the team, I'm like, what day is that for sure? On August 26th, Wednesday, August 26th, that podcast will drop. So if you've enjoyed what Stu and I talked about, we even talked about it greater. We didn't get to all the questions, but we did talk about failure in there. Go out, download that podcast, tell people about this incredible work that Soon is doing. We're really excited. We're launching our Disruptor Tribe, which is a board to help us oversee the Disruptor League, and Soon is a part of that. So you're going to see his touch in everything that we do here. Additionally, save the date. Friday, August 28th, 2 weeks from today, Designing for a Just World, a place to call home. And we're going to have Colin Egglesfield on for that episode with us. And as well, Colin is doing the podcast with us. But we're going to talk about a movement that's happening, in particular that Colin and a group of people, I'm actually getting ready to sit on this advisory board that's taking place in South Chicago. And this whole philosophy around a place to call home, and what a transformation that could be around just loving people and giving them a place. So that registration link I know is popping up in the chat if you want to go ahead and get registered for that. As well, don't forget about the survey when you close today. When you leave, fill out the survey. Tell us what you want to hear. We want to keep these disruptor connections relevant to what the audience wants to hear. So if there's something out there that you want to know about, let us know. We will go find somebody. We will dig in. Thank you guys so much. Soon. Thank you again.
Thank you guys, and thank you.
We love you, and we will talk soon. So until our next episode, episode 8 in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.